Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 3 of the Forgotten History Podcast, where we teach you the history you probably didn't learn in school. Today, we're going to be taking a bit of a break from Asia, and instead, we're going to focus on 19th century Europe, because I feel that a lot of North Americans don't really know much about European history before World War One, so I think it definitely falls within the scope of this podcast. Anyways, let's get into it. Now, the idea of a nation state is one that has existed since the mid 17th century, but didn't become widespread until the 19th century, specifically in Western Europe. In essence, a nation state is a political entity with clearly defined boundaries, a government to manage the territory inside those boundaries, recognition from other nations as legitimate, and some sort of national identity, usually based on ethnicity, culture, religion, or language. Among the most powerful nation states formed in the 19th century was Germany. Let's take a deep dive to see how Germany came to be. Up until the late 19th century, what we now know as Germany was actually a collection of smaller, semi independent states. I say semi independent because they were all kinda sorta united under the Holy Roman Empire, but practically these entities could all act independently of one another. Of the hundreds of states that were part of the empire, the two most powerful were Prussia and Austria. Remember those because they're going to be coming up a lot later on. Anyways, in 1806, Napoleon came along and defeated the Holy Roman Empire, splintering it into countless smaller states. He unified most of the Germanic speaking states, with the exceptions of Prussia and Austria, into a single nation known as the Confederation of the Rhine. Predictably, many people in the Confederation didn't like living under France. With the threat of a foreign power, the people living in the region began to emphasize their own identity, which was predominantly founded on the German language and a shared artistic heritage. This marked the birth of a German national identity. By 1815, Napoleon had been defeated, and a new balance of power among Europe's major players was established during the Congress of Vienna. Along with the dissolution of the Confederation of the Rhine, Austria and Prussia both gained some territories as well. Additionally, the German Confederation was formed, although it was basically just an Austrian puppet state. Due to its lack of political unity, it wasn't seen as a contender to the great powers of Europe. This led to calls for unification to ensure the smaller Germanic states wouldn't be subjugated by a foreign army as they had been during the Napoleonic Wars. Prussia, in particular, supported the idea of unification because it was the largest of the German states and would thus have a dominant position in a unified Germany. In 1834, the Kingdom of Prussia formed the Zollverein, an economic union between the German states, with the notable exception of Austria, because fighting Austria was basically the national pastime. The Zollverein removed tariffs and allowed for free trade. In a lot of ways, it was kind of like a primitive version of the EU. As the 19th century progressed, liberal ideas such as democracy and freedom of speech began to spread around Europe. The growing discontent with the centuries old monarchist system culminated in riots across the German Confederation in 1848. Both Prussia and Austria initially tried to suppress this movement, but Prussian King Friedrich William IV eventually agreed to a parliamentary system. Accordingly, in May 1848, the Frankfurt National Assembly was formed in, hang tight, Frankfurt. Liberals across the Confederation participated in the assembly. Their main goal was to unify the German states, which brought up the question of where exactly a united Germany would draw its borders. The two ideas for a united Germany were Kleindeutschland, meaning small Germany, and Großdeutschland, meaning greater Germany. The former excluded the German speaking parts of the Austrian Empire, while the latter included them. The idea of Großdeutschland was controversial because integrating the non German parts of the Austrian Empire, such as Croatia and Hungary, would be counterproductive to the idea of a nation state based on a shared German identity. On March 28th, with a 290 to 248 majority, the Assembly voted in favor of making Friedrich William IV the Emperor of a potential united Germany, under the condition that he get approval from the Parliament to pass legislation. William rejected this proposal, citing his reduction in political power. By the summer of 1849, the assembly had been dissolved. Thus failed the first attempt at German unification. Okay, so to keep this episode from getting too long, I'm going to split this up into two parts. Check out part two to find out how Prussia eventually managed to unify Germany and forever change the history of Europe.